Hey everybody, I am back here to talk about one of my favorite things, and that's basically how to do your finances, your real estate, your wealth building journey by faith. We know that there are some natural methods that definitely work. You can invest in your 401k, you can get a W-2 and optimize your paycheck and get the match from your employer. You can budget, you can sock away money in savings, you can make wise decisions, right? So that's one way to do it. And then there is another way where you can depend totally on God and He shows you what to do. You are able to persevere beyond limiting circumstances. For those of you who don't have a job and you don't have a lot of income, you don't have a down payment. So I just want to reiterate that whether you're one camp or the other, or you may be in a blended situation where you have a great job but you don't have a down payment, or maybe you have a down payment but you don't have a job. Everyone's situation is different. But I said when I came back with my social media presence, when I wanted to kind of return, one thing I wanted to pull into my teachings or my talks or like some of the information that I'm distributing is I wanted to make sure that I include this idea of faith, the supernatural. I didn't do that as much on the first time around. I focused a lot on budgeting and on doing the right thing, which there is a place for that, you all. I just did a budget. When I did it, I wanted to cry, but that doesn't matter. The point is, you really need, it's the Spirit of God to show you what to do. In some cases, the answer is like a simple budget. In some cases, it's prayer, it's fasting, it's using your faith. So I don't want to belabor the point. I want to get into this testimony. I want to talk about how I got this Greystone building in Chicago for $12,000, $12,500 plus closing costs. So I think when it was all said and done, maybe I paid like $14,000. And I got this building in 2017. And at the time, those structures were probably the market value of a distressed Greystone would have been around anywhere between $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. So I was able to get it still at a significant discount, because I don't want somebody to say, well, that was 2017. Everything was cheaper. This is true. And I would say today those distressed structures are going for around $100,000, $115,000, and then you're gonna have to put in $100K, $150K, and maybe they will appraise out in $300, $350. I haven't really been following the market too much because I moved to Florida and I'm now in Puerto Rico. However, I want to talk about this testimony, how I got this building. So long and short of it, if you know my story, you may or may not know it, but I moved to the south side of Chicago. Why? Because I was the recipient of a property that I didn't have to pay any rent on. I didn't have to make any mortgage payments. It was how I ended up paying off over $120,000. The claim to fame was we moved to the hood to pay off all this debt. And so while I was there, I really started to enjoy myself. I felt like we had a great quality of life and things were good. And I could see myself putting down roots and staying in the south side of Chicago. It was a pretty challenging, sometimes grimy way of life, but I thrived and I loved it. I loved my neighbors, the community. We were close to downtown, close to the lakefront, close to Midway Airport. We traveled a lot. I feel like our quality of life was surprisingly high. So I wanted to do more in that neighborhood. I saw myself owning more properties, more buildings. I saw a lot of people buying properties, rehabbing them, flipping them, renting them out. So I wanted in on that action. And so what did I do? I actually started writing letters, driving around the neighborhood and writing letters to people who had Greystones, and I got a decent response rate. And I didn't even know anything about wholesaling or doing any of this when I started doing that. I just felt like the idea came from God. I started writing letters and I got a decent response rate, and nothing panned out from that effort, but there was a particular Greystone that caught my eye. It was in the 63rd and Halsted area, which is kind of like the ground zero of where they are trying to do some of the revitalization areas revitalization efforts for that area, Southside, Inglewood. So at the time, Whole Foods had just moved in. There's a Starbucks there. There is a Chipotle. There are some other retail places, and they're still continuing a lot of those development efforts to this day. So I saw this property and I fell in love. And at the time, I think it was listed at like $45K what happens? Somehow I got into it. I knew some people in the street, and I would hang around on the street a little bit. And one day I saw this, maybe like property preservation company. Yeah, there was a guy in there, and he's cleaning it out. And so I'm asking him a little about the property. He lets me in, and I just kind of whisked through because I didn't feel like I was supposed to be there anyway. And he was kind of nervous about letting me in. They're definitely very distressed. And so they ended up taking the property off of the market, and it came back at an auction. And I remember bidding on I signed up for the auction and everything. I scraped enough pennies together to, put down a down payment to participate, or like a deposit to participate in the auction. And so at the time, I think I had like maybe $15,000 in the bank. So when the price got above $12,000, I was like, all right, I'm out. I was like the sharks in the Shark Tank. I'm out. And the price kept getting bid up, and eventually I think the auction closed around $28,000. And I was bummed out about it. I was looking at some other properties, and I was like, it just wasn't meant to be. So this is the kicker, you all. So about maybe a month and a half later, I get an email from the auction company saying that the buyer was not able to perform on their contract, and they would honor my highest bid, which at the time, again, was $12,500. And then I just had to bring some closing costs to the table. I was very scared, but I was also elated. I was like, what just happened? I knew that something miraculous had just happened, but I was also scared because this property needed serious work. So I went through everything. We did closing. We did like an electronic closing. I wired my little $14K to the title company. And at the time I was married, and I felt like that was and my anniversary was around that time. I felt like it was a beautiful anniversary gift. And I was just so happy that I had finally closed on like what I would consider one of my first-ish investment properties, because the primary residence I was in at the time I eventually started renting out. So this is like first, second, and a half. It gets a little blurry. So anyway, that is the story of how I got this property miraculously, debt-free, super cheap. And in another video, I want to talk about how I was able to renovate the property and turn it into a very lucrative Airbnb. Yes, on the south side of Chicago, and what some would consider to be a very blighted area. I was able to beautifully rehab this place, renovate it. It was literally a gut rehab. I could look down into the basement through the floorboards. I could look up to the blue sky through the ceiling where there were pieces missing, from the ceiling and the roof. And I was able to renovate this property, bring it to a very beautiful state, furnish it, and eventually Airbnb it out. So I got a call coming in. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but I am going to record another video to talk about the renovation process. So I hope this was informative and inspiring to someone, and then I'll see you on part 2 of this video.